Next, from Chicago, we head to the City Club of Chicago as Lori Lightfoot, the president of the Chicago Police Board, gives an address on how, in her words, the Chicago Police Department must adapt to the changing world. This runs about 35 minutes.
Our guest today is the president of the Chicago Police Board. She has served in this position for 6 months. Our guest today is a trial attorney, investigator, and risk manager. She has, number one, tried over 20 federal and state jury bench trials, and number two, has argued cases in state and federal appellate courts. Our guest today earned her undergraduate degree at the University of Michigan and her law degree at the University of Chicago. Ladies and gentlemen, Lori Lightfoot. Lori? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you all very much for being here today, and thanks to the City Club for inviting me to speak about important issues related to policing in Chicago. I think we all recognize this is an important historical moment in our city. The relationship between citizens all over the city and our police department is severely damaged. Trust has been broken. Many within the department also feel demoralized. This is a critical moment, and the steps we take to address these and other issues will chart the course for our collective future. Now, despite these significant challenges, I believe this is a moment of great opportunity, a moment where we can make significant, lasting, and needed change within one of the most important institutions in our city government. At a time when we must restore the trust of the people in the police department, the consent of the governed has been fundamentally shaken, and we must seize this moment to re-engage the public. The selection of the next superintendent is an important milestone in our journey. The person chosen to lead the second largest police department in the nation must be a person of unquestioned integrity, devoted to inclusive leadership, and someone who embraces and has a track record of successful community engagement, among other important traits. We were fortunate to receive 39 applications on Friday from people all over the country with a broad array of collective and individual experience. That sheer number, particularly in these challenging times, bodes well for our future. My colleagues and I on the police board, many of whom are in the audience here today, will be meeting soon to identify the best candidates to interview, and we hope to deliver recommendations to the mayor by the end of February. We have conducted this search for superintendent in a different way from the past, most notably through specific public engagement. We held a community forum on the South Side last Tuesday at Kennedy King College, where we heard directly from members of the community about the attributes they would like to see in the next superintendent, the policy priorities that the next superintendent should embrace, and a range of other issues. We will host another such forum this Thursday during our regularly scheduled monthly meeting. The board and I believe that these opportunities to hear directly from the public are critically important to us and to them. Now, I would like to put into context some of the key issues that our next police superintendent will be facing. You know that some of the toughest challenges that the next superintendent will face are high incidences of crime in certain neighborhoods, poverty and lack of resources in those very same neighborhoods, the proliferation of illegal guns, and an entrenched and understandably high level of frustration, anger, and skepticism, not only about the police, but all forms of government. And let me talk in a little more detail about those issues. As you might imagine, over the last few months, there's been no shortage of people bending my ear on a range of issues related to policing in Chicago. And one comment in particular continues to resonate with me. It came to me from one of my friends on the South Side, a minister, who said, and I think he's here in the room today, if you don't face it, you can't fix it. And I think that bears repeating. If you do not face these challenges, you cannot fix them. And in order to address what needs to be fixed across the entire local law enforcement infrastructure here in Chicago, and to try and halt and reduce the widening gulf between the police and the communities that they serve, we must face some hard truths. There are clearly obvious policy and practices that must be abandoned immediately. But we also should not assume that everything is rotten and corrupt in the police department, because that is not correct either. The perspectives I have about Chicago policing have been honed over many years of being engaged in these issues as both an outsider and an insider. Now, I became aware of policing in Chicago when I came to this great city in 1996. As a law student at the University of Chicago Law School, the older black students warned us first years to be careful on the campus and the streets of Hyde Park. The university police had a reputation for stopping black students, particularly the men. And because our numbers were few, we believed that the police assumed we couldn't possibly belong in such an august place, and that we might be looking for trouble. My insights deepened when I served as an assistant United States attorney, investigating and prosecuting gang crimes and drug trafficking. Those cases often carried whispers of corrupt police officers. Now, my education expanded exponentially when I had the great fortune to be hired by then Superintendent Terry G. Hillard. And I would be remiss if I let this moment pass without thanking him for his great support and friendship over the years. In my view, one of the best and greatest public servants that this city has ever known. He's a great leader, and I am thankful every day for his friendship and support. And it was during my time working with Superintendent Hillard in the early 2000s as the chief administrator of what was then known as the Office of Professional Standards that many of my deepest insights about policing were formed. I learned from being awakened in the middle of the night to investigate scenes related to another police-involved shooting in many neighborhoods that remain plagued by violence today. And Superintendent Hillard made me part of his senior management team, and together as a group, we tackled many of the issues that are top of mind today. I have also, of course, learned from the many people here and across the country who have shared their experiences on these streets, their research as academics, and their judgments and common sense, and of course, their sage advice. These experiences and more inform my personal views about what we must face in order to fix the problems and implement a significant course correction, particularly concerning community engagement. Now let's talk for a moment about the kind of issues we must face. We cannot talk about policing in Chicago without having some honest conversations about race and poverty. If we think about 4 neighborhoods in Chicago that consistently have the highest rates of violence: Austin, West Englewood, Roseland on the far south side, and North Lawndale on the west side, it is no coincidence that those neighborhoods also suffer from all of the indices that denote abject poverty. For example, during the time period 2005 to 2011, the average unemployment rate for Austin was 21%. For West Englewood, 34.7%. For Roseland, 17.8%. And for North Lawndale, 18.5%. And those same neighborhoods are ravaged by crime. And let me throw out a few statistics. During the time period of 2013 to 2014, Austin had 67 homicides. West Englewood, 48. Roseland and North Lawndale, 27. During that same time period, Austin had 725 armed robberies with a gun. West Englewood, 316. Roseland, 376. And North Lawndale, 315. So what are the realities in these and other neighborhoods? A lack of jobs, high crime, and a seemingly unlimited supply of illegal guns. And let me talk about that for a moment as well. The Chicago Police Department leads the nation in the recovery of illegal guns. On a year-by-year comparison, CPD collects more illegal guns off our streets than LA and New York combined. Two population centers that dwarf ours, but yet we are collecting more illegal guns off our streets than either of those two departments combined. And that can't be easily explained by superior strategies, more emphasis. That's not what's happening. What we know, though, is that this stark difference in gun recoveries is a result of the fact that many areas of Chicago are literally ringed by gun shops. And guns can easily be procured in neighboring states like Indiana and Illinois and Wisconsin. And there's a constant entrenched pipeline of illegal gun running that comes from many southern states. And I should say that the figures that I've been quoting you today have been provided by the University of Chicago Crime led by the lovely and amazing Rosanna Ander, who I believe is also here. So what do these statistics tell us about those communities and the challenges of policing? First, there are too many neighborhoods in which there is an alarming dearth of basic community services and anchors like decent schools, daycare, churches, community centers, parks, or even grocery stores. As a result, these communities often lack hope, and we have to fix that. And many social scientists who have studied these neighborhoods and the attendant crime statistic will tell you that the continuous and seemingly unending stream of illegal guns that are readily available pose a significant challenge to the police. Now, we would be naive if we did not think that when confronted with these realities, that the police who are assigned to these neighborhoods assume that many people are armed with illegal firearms and that some will have no hesitation to resolve even the most petty dispute with violence. We need look no further than the number of our children who are routinely the victims of gunshots, even coming into their homes where they are playing or where they are sleeping. Simply put, there are way too many firearms on our streets, and that fact completely changes the dynamic of policing in many neighborhoods. My experiences have also taught me that often the only governmental actor who consistently shows up in these poor, desperate, and violent neighborhoods, whether called or not, is the police. Because the police are the ones who come calling, who by circumstance are routinely interfacing with people in these communities, they also confront the manifestations of our neglect of these communities. And it is abundantly clear that given the myriad of problems plaguing these neighborhoods, the police are ill-equipped to address most of these communities' actual needs. And adding to these complexities are recent examples that we have seen of how certain police officers have exacerbated that anger, that frustration in people in those neighborhoods. Those officers have not lived up to the high expectations that we rightfully have of individuals who want to call themselves the police. They have not exercised appropriate respect or restraint in dealing with members of the public, and we must fix that as well. And it starts with leadership and proper supervision at each step in the chain of command. And we have to hold those supervisors responsible for their officers. And I know my friend Tom Burns agrees with that wholeheartedly. I hasten to add that most police officers, men and women, white or of color, do their job the right way every day. Every year, the police have millions of contacts with citizens that end without any incident and no complaints. But those officers who are doing their jobs the right way must be responsible not only for themselves, but for their partners and colleagues who have gone astray. It is not enough that individual officers do their job with integrity. They cannot bear witness to misconduct by others. turn a blind eye, and believe that all is well. That is why the police board specifically asked each applicant for the superintendent's job to be part of the solution in making sure that all officers operate with integrity. But understand what we are asking here, and let's relate this to your own professional lives. I'll pick on myself as a lawyer. When you see a colleague who is cutting corners or creating a potential risk for your firm, do you raise your hand and call out this person by name, particularly to someone in management? In other professions, when you see someone who is doing the job the wrong way, whether intentionally or through neglect, do you step up and report it? Do each of us have the courage of our convictions to put the finger, as they would say, on a colleague who engages in these and other bad behaviors in the workplace? We rightfully ask police officers to be that kind of person. But we are asking individual officers to give voice to problems with others who they literally may depend on for their very life and safety. A very challenging issue that must be addressed. And those bad officers bring terrible dishonor on their colleagues. The department and the city and the damage that they create resonates long after the initial incident is over. This problem must be fixed, but we need to recognize the unique challenges here. And despite all these challenges, I know that the police and those communities that they serve need each other. Most of us will live our lives without ever having to worry about gunshots being fired indiscriminately in our neighborhoods, open-air drug markets on the corner, or whether our kids can get to school safely without an armed escort. But for some of our residents, that is the reality of daily life, and not just now, going back years. So we need the police to be successful in their mission, and we need them to do their jobs the right way, consistent with their oaths to serve and protect, consistent with the laws of the state and the Constitution, and with respect and empathy for all citizens, regardless of race, color, creed, or economic status. But let's realize that the police are not the cause of all a community's ills. They are not, and they are also not always the right solution. Too often we have conceded responsibility for the mentally ill, the poor, the undereducated, and of course the violent to the police. The police cannot be the parents, the guardians, the teachers, the social workers, mental health or drug addiction counselors, and of course the list goes on and on. These are all critical elements of a safety net, but in many urban communities in particular, we unfairly expect the police to take on and solve all of these challenges. We ask too much, and consequently, we get too little. We also need to face the fact that race matters in policing. In policing, we need to follow the example set by many corporations which have acknowledged unconscious bias in the workplace and have initiated open, albeit tough, conversations about race. We can no longer afford to avoid this conversation if we really want to address fundamental change in the nature of the relationships between the police and the communities that they serve. We need to face these and other hard truths now. We cannot wait for the Department of Justice to take its long deliberative course. You know that we have the police and community on opposite sides of an ever-widening divide. This problem didn't just start with Ferguson, as a lot of prognosticators have stated. The seeds of this problem were painted decades ago, and these flashpoints that get revealed through cell phone videos or otherwise are simply capturing the fruit of that harvest. There is a level of frustration and anger and lack of respect for any authority that is pervasive and frankly dangerous, literally all around us. The police bear the brunt of that anger, but the police have also sometimes fueled that anger by their actions, by their omissions, and a lack of understanding and respect. These are some of the hard truths that we need to face in order to move forward in a different and better way. These, unfortunately, are the turbulent waters that the next superintendent will be compelled to wade into. So what are some solutions? Lest I leave you with such a dour set of problems. Despite all these problems facing policing in Chicago, I sincerely believe that we have a tremendous opportunity to make real, lasting, and systemic changes, and to make this department a model for the nation. Many of the typical obstacles have given way. Past crises involving the police have resulted in some changes, but nothing like what is needed and possible now. And the selection of the next superintendent is an important part of that solution that will set the course for facing and fixing the things that are immediate and are important to real accountability. Now, the task force on police accountability, which I also chair, in one of my many hats in serving the public, that task force, I think, will offer important solutions to many of these challenges. The task force will be taking on 5 key areas: de-escalation, developing better protocols to de-escalate potentially violent encounters between the police and individuals who are in emotional or mental or other distress. Establishing a common sense policy on the release of videotaped evidence in police-involved shootings and other activities involving use of force by the police. Community engagement. Everything involves community engagement, a critical element of effective policing strategy. Chicago created the concept of community policing, which became a model for the nation. And we need to get back to that place where we lead, where we address and we engage the public in a respectful, important partnership that is fundamental to any policing strategy. Development of an early warning system that identifies red flags with officers and compels appropriate intervention so that we get officers back on track, or failing that, we identify the problems and we manage them out of the department. And finally, we will be conducting, as part of our task force work, a thorough review of laws, ordinances, general orders, policies, procedures, and of course, the collective bargaining agreements to determine whether there are any impediments to accountability, and if so, we will name them and we will identify solutions. The task force will work quickly and complement the work that is being done by the Department of Justice, which will necessarily be on a much longer track. We will take an unsparing and tough look at issues that may not have been discussed in the public before. We will lay out pragmatic and transparent recommendations that every Chicago resident can see and assess. In order to create real change, our recommendations will elevate integrity and accountability as the primary values that will drive every member of the Chicago Police Department. Let me be clear, though. The task force is not going to solve every problem, not every problem that confronts the department, but we will offer a very specific, detailed blueprint for change. Policing must be scrutinized continuously by those who empower them. There must be proper training and diligent accountability. Training must include context, the demographics and history of the communities that the officers serve, and identification of the key stakeholders, the people of goodwill in those communities. Police officers shouldn't just be handed the crime stats. They need to be understand and have information about what really shapes a neighborhood, the good that is there, not just the statistics on a page. And we need to make sure that we have a candid discussion about what the police can and cannot do. They need a fair and achievable job description that does not involve trying to address a myriad of social challenges which the police will never be equipped to handle. And we must get back to authentic and effective community policing, the kind that brings people together, not just in a time of or in reaction to a crisis, but on neutral ground, in a spirit of listening and respect. In my view, these are achievable goals. They are not pie-in-the-sky whimsy. And I know this because I have seen it at work here in Chicago. And we can do this if we work together and focus our attention on addressing these challenges. Thinking about the horrible reality of violence that too many of our residents face, we cannot forget these people. They need us, and we need them. Their fate has to be our fate. We need to bring the same passion and emotion to the unacceptable levels of violence in those communities as we do to issues related to policing. This is our city, and despite its challenges, I believe it is one of America's greatest cities. More importantly, I know that we have all the tools, all the resources, and the will to do better. And we can and we must do that for ourselves, for our children, and for our fellow neighbors. We cannot cede the responsibility for diving in, asking hard questions, and making a difference to others. The police have an important role to play, to be sure, but we also need to do our part. And I hope you will join me in addressing these challenges in whatever way you feel comfortable. There are a number of organizations out there who are literally saving lives, house by house, block by block. They need your help. They need your resources, of course, but they need your time and your talent as well. Now, there are many issues which the time allotted did not allow me to address, but I'll stop here and invite your questions or comments. But before I do, let me also say thank you to my colleagues at Mayor Brown. I'm looking out in the audience at people who have literally known me since I was a law student and helped nurture and support me along the way. I owe you a debt of thanks that I will never be able to repay. And I want to, excuse me, I want to thank Paul Tice. Sorry, Paul, that I'm crying as I'm saying your name. And the partner in charge of our Chicago office, Rebecca Eisner. You two have been tremendous, and I really appreciate your support. I also want to thank my fellow police board members who work hard every day to render the right decisions and give of their time and talent in increasingly difficult circumstances. And of course, I want to thank my spouse. Don't cry or you'll make me cry. She is amazing and gives me unlimited love and support. Many of you ask me how I'm doing and how I'm hanging in there. Well, I have her to thank for everything that she does to take care of our family. So, thank you so much.
Here we go. Rapid fire. Michael Bauer. Needs no introduction, correct. How many hours of public hearings will the task force on police accountability hold before it submits its report to the mayor?
We are planning 4 public forums all over the city. And the plan is to start those, I believe, at 6:30. Well, so we'll probably have about 3 hours plus for each of those. We also, frankly, think it's important, and we're encouraging people to, as they already have started to engage us in all sorts of other others. We'll have a website that'll go live later this week. Because this is Chicago, people are not shy about expressing their views and concerns. But we do think that the public process is very important, and we'll be reaching out all across the city.
Okay. Phoebe Selden, Acacia Financial Group. As a finance professional in Chicago, I am interested to understand your vision for the path forward.
Well, hopefully I've laid that out, Phoebe, wherever you are. Phoebe and I know each other going back a long way. But I think, as I said, I think one of the most important things is for us to be realistic about the tasks that we expect police officers to engage in, and we've got to invest in those neighborhoods. A lot is happening, but a lot more needs to be done. Every place that I go, every person that I talk to talks about community investment as a necessary and important part of solving the relationship between the police and the communities that they serve. Okay.
Here's a very intriguing question from Dory McWhorter, YWCA. will the early warning system require the mandatory regular mental health evaluations of police officers due to stress and trauma experienced on the job?
That's a great question, and it's frankly something that we've talked briefly about. I think there are lots of tools that are already in place to address some of the trauma and stress that police officers are experiencing. We just need to make sure that we use them effectively. You can have the best design program in the world if you don't use it. Now, we want our police officers to be warriors. Some of us. We want them to be heroic, but we have to recognize that they are people like all of us who, when they go through an incredibly traumatic experience, need to be tended to. And again, the department has a lot of programs that are in place. We just need to make sure that they're actually getting used.
Okay. What can an ordinary citizen do to help? Mary Dempsey.
As I said, I think there are a lot of ways in which people can get engaged. There are organizations that are out there that really are doing the Lord's work, and are run by, fueled by, populated by people in those communities. And we're happy to give you a list of ways in which you can invest your time and your resources. But there's a lot going on out there. But we need to really be laser focused on improving the quality of life in those neighborhoods. I think that's fundamentally important. Policing plays a role, but each of us can also, I think, get engaged.
Not that this is a bad question, but it's a tough one. Antonio Ramanucci. Where are you, Antonio? All right.
I'm going to remember your face.
Remember the face. Tommy, be alert. Here we go. Based on the scrutiny the IPRA has come under, and whether it is truly independent-based agency, does it make sense for it to dissolve and become a state-based agency? It's a bad room to ask that question. Much what the city tried to do to make IPRA independent when it dissolved OPS. It's a good question. I think going to the state, though, obviously gets a little moaning here, but go right ahead.
Well, let me introduce, for those who don't know, is she still here, Sharon Farley? All right, she, of course, stepped out. Couldn't take it any longer. Sharon Farley, as many of you know, was recently appointed as the head of the Independent Police Review Authority. I know that she's doing a tremendous job. She's building her team. She is taking a very tough look at a number of the practices and policies and people involved in IPRA. I think we need to give her time to get her sea legs and figure out what needs to be done to right the ship there. I am not in favor of state oversight of much of anything these days, but particularly with all due respect to my friends who work for the state. But I think we've got the tools in place to make this work. We just have to be continually focused and diligent on doing the job that we need to do, and frankly, creating, I'm going to embarrass you, Sharon, as you're walking through the door. Sharon Farley, everyone. The question was whether or not IPRA should be dissolved and become part of some state entity. So I'm sure you have. But I know that Sharon, who is a friend, who is going to do a tremendous job. We just need to give her a chance and her team a chance to, as I said, dig in and do the hard work that needs to be done. But, you know, the question I think really, I'll turn it around a little bit. All of us who are part of this work, and whether you're in the police department, outside of it, whether you're working for a not-for-profit in those neighborhoods, all of us who are doing this work need to refocus and double our energies and efforts. And we need to get the good news out there. I know that's a challenge because it doesn't necessarily lend itself to sound bites. It's not as provocative as some of the other things that are reported in the news. But we need to keep doing that hard work and let, as the Bible verse goes, let our little light shine so that people know that there's hope in those neighborhoods, because there is. We've got tough challenges, but there's some good things that are happening, and we just have to talk more about it, invest more in them, scale them up, as my friend Rosanna would say. And I think we will make significant progress. I'm very optimistic about that.